we're in a teaching series we're calling Red Letters. Red Letters, it was way back in 1899. It was considered a breakthrough. It was considered revolutionary when publishers of the Bible began using red ink as a way to distinguish the words of Jesus. And if you have an old-fashioned Bible, I know most people use apps these days, but you'll still notice that in the Gospels, the words of Jesus are often printed in red. And we're going to look at something that's kind of basic today. It's pretty elementary, but it's something that we really need to make sure that we own in order to move forward into 2020 as disciples of Jesus. And so let me begin so it kind of paints what Jesus is like and what Jesus is all about. And it reminds me of a story. I'm sure many of you have heard it. It's an oldie but a goodie. But the story goes that there was a Sunday school class, and the teacher was walking around the classroom while the kids were drawing. They were very, focused on drawing. And the Sunday school teacher, she noticed that one particular girl was very focused. She was very dialed in on what she was drawing. And so the Sunday school teacher stopped and said, honey, what are you drawing? And without even looking up, without saying a word, she said, well, I'm drawing God. And of course, the Sunday school teacher said, well, dear, no one knows what God looks like. Without missing a beat, without stopping, without even lifting up her head, the little girl said, well, they're about to. And, throughout the millennia, there's been portrayals of Jesus. What did Jesus actually look like? And of course, obviously, he was Hebrew. He would have more likely looked Jewish. And there's been some ancient pictorials. In fact, the oldest drawing that we have of Jesus actually kind of looks like something that maybe would have come out of the Good News Club, in fact. It's the healing of the paralytic. It was only discovered in the 20th century. It was found actually on what we would call a house church, a building about this size in Syria. And one of the other oldest ones that you can actually still go and see, it's on display at the Vatican Museum, is this one. Let me show you this next one here. It's called The Adoration of the Wise Men. It was found on what we call a sarcophagus. It's written in Latin, and basically it says, sometimes with Latin, of course, there's no indentations, but it says, Severa, in God lives. That's what it's saying. And we believe, art historians believe, that the woman on the left is the woman, and of course that's the adoration of the Magi, or the wise men. And so what people are somewhat debating, does this mean that because God lives in Jesus and the infant, that's why she lives, or because of Jesus she lives? And I think the answer would be yes, to all of the above. But it's kind of interesting. Like one of the oldest references we have, one of the oldest pictographs, if you will, is this particular depiction that's still around. As far as what did Jesus actually look like, one of the oldest, what we call a portrayal of Jesus, there's a couple of them, but one of the older ones is from the Hagia Sophia. If you're ever anywhere near Istanbul, let me encourage you to make time to go to the Hagia Sophia. At one time, it was the capital of Christianity, if you will, right? And so, at that time, it was called Constantinople. However, of course, the city fell to Muslims and was renamed Istanbul. And the Hagia Sophia, sadly, was converted from a church into a mosque, and they plastered over anything that made reference to Jesus. However, inadvertently, and perhaps, probably freaked them out when they learned later that plastering actually helped preserve some of the artwork. And this is one of the best ones. That's actually the original paint, and that's from about the 500s. So this is one of the earliest portrait portrayals that we have of Jesus. One of the ones that's probably the most controversial right now would be, I would say, the Shroud of Turin. And I'm sure many of you have seen this or heard about it. There's some very smart people who believe this is the image of Jesus. And we probably won't know for certain until we get to heaven, but some people are saying that through the bodily resurrection of Jesus that it left this image on these garments. And again, the jury's still out, but some people are really smart people are saying, no, this is it. We really think this is it. Now, the most famous portrait portrayal of Jesus actually was made by an American artist. It was in 1940. So let me show you this next one. And I'm sure you've seen this one before. And so you can show this image anywhere around the world, whether it's Haiti or Africa, North Pole to South Pole. Show this image and people are going to say, yeah, that's Jesus, right? And so this is the most famous one. I used to have a card in my wallet, in fact, that had this image on there. I'm sure you've seen this one all over. And in recent times, one of the more famous portraits of Jesus was made by a little European girl. She had what we would call a near-death experience, and she was pronounced clinically dead for a while, and she said she went to heaven. Again, her story we may never know for certain, but that was her story, and she said this is what Jesus looked like. She was a painter. And this was depicted in the movie Heaven is for Real, about a little boy who had like a similar instance that he went to heaven and said, yeah, that's Jesus. And what's interesting, though, about all these different images is we know for a fact that sooner or later we will see Jesus for ourselves, right? There's a number of Bible verses that tell us we'll actually get to see him face to face. That's pretty amazing. I mean, face to face, we will see ourselves. And what's more important between now and then, that'll be here sooner than later, what's more important is that we actually reflect Jesus. That's a part of his calling to us. I kind of scratched the surface on this last week. Genesis 1:28 tells us Adam and Eve were told they are to fill the earth, be fruitful, right? And we talked about that. And it's always been God's plan that he have image bearers around the planet who reflect him and his ways, who worship him. And this mandate has been opposed. It's sometimes been violently opposed, but this mandate has never gone away. God wants image bearers, you and I, people who created in his image, to reflect him and his ways around the planet. And one of the ways we can do that is through learning about his teachings. And not only learning his teachings, but of course, applying and living out his teachings. So when we do so, we are reflecting God to the world. Specifically, we're reflecting Jesus to the world. And a lot of people would say one of the best ways to do this as well in regards to the teachings is the Sermon on the Mount. It is easily the most famous sermon, most famous speech that's ever been given. And it's always been fascinating to me, the vast array of people who have been influenced by the Sermon on the Mount. One of my favorites, probably not a shocker to you, Thomas Jefferson, said that the teachings of Jesus are the most sublime and benevolent code of morals which has ever been offered to man, more perfect than any of those of the ancient philosophers. And he was actually a very well-read individual. In fact, he donated his personal library to form what would become the Library of Congress. Very well-read, very well-versed. And so that's kind of impressive coming from someone of his caliber to say that. Here's someone who was probably one of the most read individuals in America at that time. The person that he made the Louisiana Purchase from, Napoleon, clarified Napoleon Bonaparte, not Napoleon Dynamite, today's culture. But Napoleon said this, he said, Alexander, Caesar, Charlemagne, and I have founded empires. But on what did we rest the creations of our genius? Upon force. Jesus Christ founded his empire upon love, and at this hour, millions would die through him. So one of the ways we can learn about Jesus as we move into 2020, it's batter up, it's our turn. Just like the apostles in the first, hey, it's batter up, it's our turn to represent Jesus, to reflect his teachings, is to immerse ourselves into the teachings of Jesus and to look at some of the very basic elementary things he said. And that's our goal really today. And the Sermon on the Mount is often seen as that's the one, that's where you want to start. And it's, again, another person who was influenced by the Sermon on the Mount was Gandhi. There's even people who, as far as we know, they never made a proclamation of being a follower of Jesus. But even Gandhi, he said this, he goes, I like your Christ. I do not like your Christians. Ouch. Your Christians are so unlike your Christ. The message of Jesus, as I understand it, is contained in the Sermon on the Mount. That's what Gandhi said. And he wouldn't be wrong on that, right? That the essence of Jesus is contained in the Sermon on the Mount and some of his other teachings, of course, as well. So if you have your Bible, you can open up to Matthew chapter 5. And I'm actually going to be also, we're going to be in two different passages today. I'm also going to be in Luke 18 later. But as you're turning to Matthew chapter 5, let me set the stage for you as to what's happening. Basically, Jesus has become famous. Cat's out of the bag. Now, people are hungry for a Messiah. They want to be delivered from the Roman government. In the final verses of Matthew chapter 4, Matthew, an eyewitness, the Gospels are known as the eyewitness accounts. Matthew says this, and he, talking about Jesus, went throughout all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and every affliction among the people. So his fame spread throughout all Syria. And they brought him all the sick, those afflicted with various diseases and pains, those oppressed by demons, those having seizures and paralytics, and he healed them. And great crowds followed him from Galilee and the Decapolis, and from Jerusalem and Judea, and from beyond the Jordan. Notice this is an absolute potpourri, a mishmash of people, right? So for one, we have people from Galilee. Okay, these are going to be people from rural communities, right? They're from out there. They're from out there in the sticks. People from the Galilee have come to hear Jesus, to come and hear this message. He references Syria. Did you catch that? Syria, this is a completely different nation. At one time, it was a part of Assyria, of course, the enemy of Israel. Well, the enemies, the foreign nations or people from foreign nations are traveling to come and hear Jesus. The Decapolis, pretty fascinating. This is a group of 10 towns. 10 towns specifically that were founded by Alexander the Great, the Alexander the Great. Okay, they are very Greek in their culture. They are not Torah observant, if you know what I'm saying. All right. Jerusalem, can it get any more Jewish than Jerusalem? I don't think so. That's the capital of Judaism, isn't it? So people from Jerusalem. So you got the cosmopolitan people. You've got people from the rural areas. Look, we got red state, blue state people coming to Jesus, all right, to hear him. It even says beyond the Jordan, all right? So we don't even know. It's like, man, they're just out there, all right? It's like way out in Anthem or something, man. There's like way, way out there. People are coming to hear Jesus, and they're traveling by foot and hoof, right? There's no light rail, there's no Chevy Colorados, no El Caminos. They're coming by foot and hoof to hear Jesus. They've gone to great lengths to hear Jesus. And then he says this, seeing the crowds, chapter 5, verse 1, he went up on the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him. So by the way, when a rabbi would sit down, this means, hey, he's getting ready to say something important. Okay, so this is kind of like, hey, the speaker went up to the podium, or his mic was turned on, or, it's like he's getting ready to say something. He opened his mouth and taught them, saying, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, you and I, many of us anyway, and I'm sure most of you watching online, we've heard these words so many times, they go in one ear and out the other. All right. Some of you grew up memorizing perhaps the Beatitudes and Vacation Bible School. And, there's a saying, though, that familiarity breeds contempt. I've noticed sometimes with the Bible, familiarity can sometimes breed unfamiliarity. It's like, yeah, I think I know it, but do I really? And this is really the elementary principle we want to kind of take a look at today is what is Jesus talking about here? Keep in mind, these are the very first words to come out of his mouth. Excluding teaching in the synagogue at Nazareth. As far as like a public declaration, this is it. Hey, everybody's here. Hey, I'm so glad everybody came out today. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. I'm sure some people say, hey, wait a minute, what? Can I get my money back? We came to hear that. I thought we were going to hear about a revolution. I thought we were going to hear about a plan to overthrow the Roman government. What's going on here? Did I hear that correctly? And the best way I can perhaps analyze, or provide a modern day metaphor would be really like a presidential race. So here's where Jesus is at this particular time. So people are coming. I've heard sound bites about this guy. I've heard some other people talking about him. I saw a commercial. It was paid for, authorized by. I'm hearing stuff. People are talking. But what does he really believe? The only thing I've seen is like a little news clip. I've heard some people on Facebook say stuff, but what is he really all about? And that's what this Sermon on the Mount is all about. And he begins by saying, blessed are the poor in spirit. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. It's almost like he's saying, lucky are the unlucky, right? Theirs is, it's like, wait a minute, this doesn't really compute. This doesn't make sense. Excuse me. And you'd probably be wondering at this point, excuse me, did I hear that correctly? Did you hear what I just heard? Did he just say, blessed are the poor in spirit? Is that what he just said? That theirs is the kingdom of heaven? Did you hear what I heard? It's kind of, I don't know if you've ever noticed this before, but sometimes you can go through your whole life singing a song incorrectly, right? Have you ever noticed that? There was a song that went, the answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. And my mom said that for years, for decades. She thought they were saying that the ants are my friends, like the insects. The ants are my friends. They're blowing in the wind. And she was like, can't somebody help these poor ants? They've been swirling around for decades. Somebody please help them, Or in the 1980s, a guy named Huey Lewis had a song called I Want a New Drug. And my wife said she thought for sure he was saying, I want a new truck. Now, in this particular case, the whole song is better. All right, if you sing it, I want a new truck, it actually works. Or There was a guy named Eddie Money. He was kind of like a one-hit wonder. He had a song called "I've Got 2 Tickets to Paradise." A lot of people thought he was saying, "I've got 2 chickens to paralyze." All right, I've got 2 chickens to paralyze. All right, a lot of people thought that's what he was saying. All right, I mean, their whole life they're like singing this at the top of their lungs. You know. The problem was, see, back before the internet, the only way you could learn the lyrics to a song was to buy the album, which would have the lyrics, or just to keep hoping it'll be on the radio again. It's like, man, what's that song saying? And you just have to listen to it over and over before you would finally get it. So one of the most famous misquoted songs was Dancing Queen by ABBA. And the actual lyric says, "See that girl, watch that scene, digging the dancing queen." A lot of people thought it was saying, "See that girl, watch her scream, kicking the dancing queen." You know, so they were apparently like at a concert, like a disco. No, we're not saying kick the dance. No, that's not what the song's saying, right? But a lot of people at the top of their lungs are singing that. "Bad Moon Rising" by Creedence Clearwater Revival. I see a bad moon rising. There's a bad moon on the rise. It's the actual lyric. A lot of people were singing it. "I see a bad moon rising. There's a bathroom on the right." All right, which I don't know. In some ways, that kind of makes sense too. In a way. It's like, hey, you know what? Some werewolves are about to come out. However, there's a bathroom up here on the right. Better make it quick. All right, so it's going to get crazy. Elton John's Tiny Dancer, actual lyric, "Hold me closer, Tiny Dancer." A lot of people thought for sure he was saying, "Hold me closer, Tony Danza." All right, "Hold me closer, Tony Danza." It's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? What does that mean? What's Tony Danza got? Okay, anyways. That's how this can be sometimes. Sometimes we can hear particular Bible verses forever and ever. It's like, do you really have the lyrics right, though? And if you were there at the Sermon on the Mount, you might be asking yourself that. Did you hear what I just heard? Did Jesus just say, "Blessed are the poor in spirit"? Because, wait a minute here. I mean, it doesn't make sense. I mean, first of all, just start with the word blessed. I mean, how often do we hear this word and it's like, well, what is that actually talking about? We say something like, when someone sneezes, say, "Yeah, God bless you." All right, if it's on an airplane, they're sitting right beside you, say it with some attitude. "Yeah, God bless you." And I tell you what, Lord have mercy. All right. I had one person, I remember, he said, "God bless you," someone who sneezed on an airplane, and they said, "Well, I'm an atheist." He goes, "Oh, well, have a nice day." I mean, what do you say? I guess Gesundheit or something like that, right? So what is blessed? And see, here's what's fascinating is a lot of times we are prone, especially as 21st century Americans, we think the word blessed means that everything's going smooth in your life. All is well. Everything's just going fine. You don't have any problems at all. In fact, this is as old, though, as the book of Job. Remember, Job, basically the bottom dropped out of his life, and his counselors, which, man, God help you, God bless you if you have those kind of counselors, right? Well, you must have done this sin, you must have done that sin, and whatever. And no, just sometimes our wealth, our lack of wealth, it isn't a result of God's blessing. Sometimes it's irrelevant. I mean, sometimes, right? I'm always thankful whenever celebrities or athletes, hey, I just want to bless, give my blessings. I always really appreciate that. But sometimes, as far as what Jesus is talking about here, it's not quite that. That's not quite what he's talking about here. In fact, if anything, I think, I'm sure you're astute observers of culture, you've probably noticed that, in fact, for some people, the very worst thing that can happen to them is to acquire wealth and fame, right? I'm not going to mention any names this morning, but I can think of a number of Christian recording artists who aren't really Christian anymore. What I mean is they got their start singing in churches, singing in the youth group choir, singing in choirs at their churches, and then they got famous and they won't have anything to do with Jesus, right? And they get caught up in weird lifestyles and all types of sexual perversions. And it's like some people, hey, the worst thing that can happen for you is to find success, right? So we see that. So we know that he's not always, talking about that. Jim Carrey, for example, said, "I wish everyone could get rich and famous and have everything they ever dreamed of so that they will know it's not the answer." If anyone knew about success, would have been, as far as athletes go, it would be Deion Sanders. He played on Super Bowl championship teams for both the San Francisco 49ers and the Dallas Cowboys. He made a World Series appearance and even recorded his own album. But he said this, though. He goes, "After I won the Super Bowl, I went and bought a $278,000 Lamborghini and realized I was more empty than ever. I was empty, no peace, no joy." In fact, he went on to kind of attempted suicide, and at the last minute he changed his mind, but he still ended up driving the car off of like a 35 to 40-foot cliff and survived it. And he went on to say, I finally just got on my knees and I gave it all to the Lord. I had to get a whole lot of word in so I could fight off the enemy. So my point is that blessed, in the context here of the Sermon on the Mount, here's what it means. It means to be in good standing with God. So let's kind of clarify that. What does it mean to be blessed? It means to be in good standing with God, to have God's favor. It means that you're in harmony with God. In fact, though, some forms of the Greek word will use it to describe joy. And remember, joy is different from happiness. Happiness comes from good things happening to you. Hey, I like to be happy. But happiness means that if good things happen, then I'm happy. But problem is that good things don't always happen. So then what, right? Well, there's that joy of the Lord, right, that comes in. So really this word's loosely connected to the word joy. But he's talking about you're at peace with God. This is the person who's blessed. And this is as old as the Garden of Eden, all right? Ever since the Garden of Eden, since sin came, there's been disharmony between God and humanity, okay? And so God's always been working on bringing about that harmony, all right? This is what God wants. We even see this in Revelation. God has always wanted to dwell with us. He's always wanted to be with us, all right? Jesus was saying, look, I'm going to prepare a place for you. Why? So that where I am, there you can be. This is what God has always wanted. But sin is what causes a problem here, all right? Sin separates us from God. And so blessed means, oh, you're in good standing with God. You guys, you have some harmony. You're at peace. And so that's what that means. And what the question then is, that's what blessed is. So what about poor in spirit? Does that mean that blessed are the people who are depressed? Not necessarily, not here. There's another one that says, blessed are those who are mourned, they'll be comforted. But to learn what poor in spirit means, I'm going to ask you to turn to Luke chapter 18. Luke chapter 18. And Jesus is going to give a parable in which he unpacks what it means to be poor in spirit. So let's crash course where we're at so far. So blessed. We know that there's wealthy, righteous people, and there's also righteous people who are in poverty, right? So that has nothing to do with it. Are you with me? All right, look, I've seen some very wealthy Christians who, man, they really use their money in great ways for God's kingdom to make the world a better place. But I've also, quite honestly, I've met some pretty mean homeless people over the years, all right? So that has nothing to do with it here, what he's talking about. He's talking about blessing. No, those who are in right standing, good standing with God. So now we're going to talk about poor in spirit. So here we are, Luke 18, verse 9. He, Jesus, also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and treated others with contempt. Two men went up into the temple to pray, Jesus is saying, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, prayed thus, God, I thank you that I am not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all that I get. Let me hit the pause button right here. This is pretty good, quite honestly. This is pretty good, isn't it? For one, he's doing a lot of good things. And, fasting twice a week, that's pretty impressive. I'm not show of hands, but I'm going to guess that's probably more than most of us. He's fasting twice a week. Now, biblically speaking, the Hebrews were only required to fast on Yom Kippur. That's once a year. All right? Now, there were restricted diets for certain feasts and stuff, but this Pharisee, man, he's fasting twice a week. That's pretty good. I have to say it's pretty impressive. It also says that he tithes everything that he gets. Any income that comes in, I'm going to tithe it. That's really good, actually. All right? That's pretty impressive. We know from other things about the Pharisees, from some first century writings, that they would even tithe cinnamon, herbs, and spices, anything that was considered a commodity. So if you were growing something in your garden that was considered a commodity, well, he's saying this guy tithes even that as well. Keep in mind that the Pharisees, generally speaking, they had memorized the first 5 books of the Bible. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, memorized, right? Memorized, right? So it's pretty good, all right? And it's pretty good, but the story's not quite over just yet. So there's the Pharisee, and now we're going to look at the tax collector. Now the tax collector, before I read about him, let's refresh our memories. The tax collectors, they were generally Hebrews who collected taxes from their fellow Hebrews to give to the Roman government, the enemy. All right, so imagine we were, God forbid, occupied by California. All right, God help us, have mercy. All right, and your Arizona neighbors, they were collecting taxes from you to give to California. All right, yeah, I don't know about that. All right, I mean, it makes it tricky, doesn't it? All right, so they're working for the enemy. Now, the tax collectors of the first century who worked for the Roman government, they got paid commission. All right, now, hey, working commission can cause the best of people to fudge the facts sometimes. All right? People who work commission sometimes, the very best of people, yeah, there's always that temptation. And they kind of had this shady reputation about them, that they would manufacture false taxes that didn't really exist. And guess what? If you didn't pay up, guess what? They had the full weight of the Roman government behind them. Oh, you want some Roman soldiers come to your door? I can arrange that for you. All right, that's how they rolled. So that's the tax collector. But the tax collector, Jesus says, standing far off, will not even lift up his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man, tax collector, went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humble, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. Justified means to be declared righteous. That's what biblically it means. If you are justified, it means not guilty, not guilty. No double jeopardy here. You are declared not guilty. That's what justified means. Before God, you are declared not guilty. And what did Jesus just say? Wait a minute, this guy, wait, let's get this straight here. Let me get this straight. The tax collector, you're telling me, he went away justified? Yeah, that's exactly what Jesus is saying here. And it's fascinating because it's a complete reversal of the outcome you would have expected. Especially if you're in the first century, you're listening to Jesus talk. Oh, well, of course the Pharisee. Look at all he does, right? How can you compete with that? Well, you can't, really. He represents those who are confident in their own righteousness. So look back there in verse 9, he says, he gives this parable, what, to those who, NIV says, who are confident in their own righteousness. That's how the NIV will translate that. They're confident in their own deeds. They're confident in their own righteousness. Now, by the way, let me say something real quick. I want to make sure we get this. These are good things. You should know your Bible. All right? Jesus will, in fact, say on the Sermon on the Mount, when you fast, right? When you give. These are things to be expected. What's the difference here? The difference is that this Pharisee, he's placing his faith in his deeds, right? Rather than in God, Jesus, for his salvation. And quite honestly, most of us, at one point in our lives, we were like that. And perhaps some of you watching online or here today, even you're still like that. You're hoping that, hey, maybe my good deeds will outweigh my bad deeds and I'll get into heaven, right? That's pretty much what every world religion teaches. Yep, they've got different ways of saying it, but ultimately that's what every world religion falsely teaches, is that somehow your good deeds are going to outweigh your bad deeds. Or somehow you're going to, if you do this, you'll be reincarnated into a butterfly rather than a cricket. I don't know. Who makes that decision, by the way? That's a whole different message. In today's language, in today's culture, it might be something like this. Well, yeah, but that person's a vegan, and hey, that's cool. And that person's very involved in social justice issues. Hey, that's cool, but that's not going to save your soul. Those are good things, I think. Vegan, I don't know, it might affect your diet if you're okay with that, but you get my picture. You see what I'm saying? It's like, yeah, but I do this, I don't do that, and I do these things. Surely my good deeds will outweigh my bad deeds. And Jesus says, no, guess what? Got a shocker for you. Got a shocker for you. The guy who works on commission has been kind of shady. Because he knows he needs forgiveness, he's the one who gets justified. This is turning their world upside down at this particular point. And so the Pharisee, unfortunately, because of all the good things he's doing, thinks that he doesn't need salvation. And so another way to translate this would be almost saying this: blessed are those who realize they need a Savior. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who realize they need Jesus. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That's another way of translating that and looking at it. So who are the poor in spirit? Well, the poor in spirit are those who have a contrite heart. They know they've messed up. They know that they need grace. Psalm 51 verse 17 says, the sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and a contrite heart, O God, you will not despise. See, this guy's, he's kind of got some eye problems, if you will, the Pharisee. Yeah, but I'm not like that guy. And how many of us have done that before? No show of hands, but, well, yeah, I've messed up, but I ain't messed up like that guy. Let me tell you what, that guy got some problems. Well, I'm doing this, and I'm doing that. Well, that's the Pharisee. And Jesus is saying, hey, I'm going to rock your world here. Blessed are those who realize they've messed up. Blessed are those who realize they need a Savior. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So the poor in spirit, that's what it's reflecting. Timothy Keller says this. He goes, the poor in spirit means seeing that you are deeply in debt before God, and you have no ability to even begin to redeem yourself. God's free generosity to you at infinite cost to him was the only thing that saved you. So here's the deal with the poor in spirit. The poor in spirit, what does that mean? It means that they realize, they know that they're not righteous, that they've done some bad things, that they've been unsuccessful in living up to God's standards, and that they need grace. Here's what I love. They look to God for mercy, and they get it. They look to God for mercy, and they get it. They get grace, they get mercy, and they get heaven. I love this. Now, also in his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus will say something else that's shocking. It's in chapter 5, verse 20. He'll say, and he says this. Now, think about this. He says, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees, you will not see the kingdom of heaven. Whoa, what? Unless your righteousness exceeds that of the Pharisees, you will not see the kingdom of heaven, Jesus says. Well, that's impossible. They have first 5 books of the Bible memorized. They fast twice a week. They tithe everything they get. That's impossible. Exactly. It can't be done. Here's the good news. Through Jesus, you are declared righteous. Through being poor in spirit, recognizing I need to be born again. Recognizing I've messed up. Who am I trying to kid? I have sinned. I have made mistakes. I have not lived up to God's standards. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. See, that's grace. That's the answer. That's where Jesus is going at with that. So they look to God for mercy, and they get it. And so this is where it all starts. Red letters, in many ways, this is where it all starts. This is what Jesus is all about. Remember, people are coming from all over. People are coming from all over. And Jesus is, from the very get-go, hey, let me give you my platform message. You know, I want you to vote for me, but let me let you know what I'm about. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That's what I'm about. And of course, we can see the other things he teaches in the Beatitudes. Hey, blessed are the merciful. They're going to receive mercy. Blessed are the peacemakers. They'll be called the children of God. Or, blessed are you when you're persecuted for righteousness' sake. It's almost like, lucky are the unlucky. But he's showing this is what joy is about. This is what I'm about. And if you want to follow me, I welcome you to follow. He's saying, but this is what you need to know. This is what I'm about. Phil Yancey, who wrote a book called The Jesus I Never Knew, said this, inarguably, the Sermon on the Mount proves that before God, we all stand on level ground. We are all desperate. And that is, in fact, the only state appropriate to a human being who wants to know God. Having fallen from the absolute ideal, we have nowhere to land but in the safety net of absolute grace. That is what it's all about. So here's the question for you this morning. If you got the lyrics right, have you maybe been hearing the lyrics wrong all these years, decades perhaps for some of you? Have you got the lyrics right? The lyrics are, blessed are the poor in spirit. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. You can't work your way in. Your good deeds will not outweigh your bad deeds. And you know what? In my early days, that's what I thought it was. I thought, hey, you know what? I'm a pretty good person. I'm not as bad as Kyle and Mike. I'll probably get in. Haven't committed any felonies. I'll probably get in. I've been baptized. Been to Vacation Bible School. I'll probably get in. But at that particular point in my life, I'd never placed my faith in Jesus Christ for my salvation. Some of you know my story, so I'm sorry for the repeat, but it was actually the exorcist that scared Hades out of me. All right, I'd seen that movie as a young man. It freaked me out. And so I did what all 20-year-old boys do. I went to Mom. All right, so Mom, I want my bed to stay still. I want my dresser drawers in place. All right, and she said you need to be born again. It just, whatever reason, it didn't register. It didn't go from head to heart. But she gave me a book by a preacher named Billy Graham. It's called The Holy Spirit. I was through reading that book. It's like, oh, now I get it. And I really was, the expression born again. It's like, oh, now I need to place my faith in Jesus for my forgiveness. And I'm sorry, Jesus, for the things I've done. And I went to my room, knelt down, asked Jesus to save me, and he did. The rest is history. That's another story. Question is this: do you have the lyrics right? Are you placing your faith in Jesus or in yourself? It's a very basic, but this is one that we have to get down. This is the one that we have to represent. This is the message of Jesus that he's going to represent over and over and over. And as you read the Gospels, as you read the red letters of Jesus, you're going to know that he's going to have run-ins over and over and over with the Pharisees on this, almost from day one. All right, because they're trying to push everyone into a works-based religion. It's like, no, it's not going to work. It's through Jesus. In fact, in John, he'll say, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. If we get this, not only do you get heaven, blessed are the poor in spirit, what theirs is the kingdom of heaven, but also you're now reflecting the correct image of Jesus to our world. In our culture, 2020s especially, more than ever before, I know it's cliche, but more than ever before, we need to reflect the right image of Jesus. That Jesus is for people. He's for people. And he's got the scars to prove it, right? I mean, it's more than lip service. He would go to the cross. This is the message of Jesus that he wants us to reflect to our world, to our workplace, even, God bless you, to your HOAs and to your school, wherever you go. This is the message he wants to reflect. Now, it's through Jesus. It's through grace that we are born again, that we see heaven. So we want to give you an opportunity this morning to do so. Perhaps those of you watching online, maybe you've got the lyrics wrong. Maybe you thought you knew the lyrics, but all this time actually been missing out the lyrics. You've been singing the song incorrectly. Jesus is the way to heaven. And remember what it said in Psalm 51, verse 17. Hey, a broken heart, a contrite heart, God will not despise that. If you regret the things you've done wrong, if you're sorry for the things you've done wrong, Jesus can forgive you of all sins, past, present, and declare you righteous, meaning even future sins. All right, not that you should abuse that, but just so you know, you'll be declared righteous. We want to give you an opportunity to do that this morning. So I'm going to ask everyone to bow their heads and close their eyes. And we don't like for people to feel like they're alone when they're doing this. And so I'm going to pray a very simple prayer. And I'd like for you just to pray it out loud with me right now. And so let's just pray this. Say, Dear Jesus, forgive me for my sins. I'm sorry for the things I've done wrong. I pray you'll take me to heaven when I die. And use my life now to reflect you. And with your head still bowed and your eyes still closed, if you prayed that for the first time, God heard your prayer. And I was wondering if you'd lift your hand for me. Anybody prayed that for the very first time? Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, you guys can all look up. For those of you who, thank you for praying. For those of you who prayed that prayer for the very first time, as you exit today, out on the patio, you're going to see a little red and white booklet that says, Why Jesus? Just go ahead and take that. It's kind of like our first lesson in being a follower of Jesus. Also has my business card in it. I'd be more than welcome to meet with you and talk with you about anything that you've heard here today. For those of you who are watching online, there's a tab. Just you can get that lesson for free in a PDF format, as well as we have some first steps for you in following Jesus. Hey, I hope you enjoyed today's message. Hope that was a blessing to you. And I wanted to let you know you can go to northchapel.net for even more spiritual resources that will help you on your journey as you follow Jesus. Hope to see you next time, and hope you have a great day.